Good morning, everybody, and welcome to All Saints Church. First of all, can we turn and wave to the camera to everyone who's streaming online from everywhere? It's great to have you joining us virtually. Folks are starting to come in. If you are new at All Saints or are visiting us this morning, would like to know about future events here at the church, there are green contact sheets near both doors. We would love it if you'd take a moment and give us your contact information. If you're online, there's places on the website where you can do that. And as always, we are fueled by so many things. We're fueled by your prayers, by the labor and ministry that you give in this place and around the world, and we're fueled by your generous financial gifts. And so if you have not yet pledged for 2019, we would love it if you would do so. And there are pledge cards in the church, and we'll make sure you get one. And if you're online, it is super easy. There's a button that says Donate. You just click on it, and you can either make a gift or it'll take you to a pledge form, and you can help support the ministry and life of All Saints Church. At all times, we put our faith into action here at All Saints, and every week we pick one thing to focus that action for the life of the world. This week at our action table out on the lawn, I really hope you don't leave without visiting there. The city of Pasadena a couple years ago committed to a $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, those of us who live in this area know that that is not anywhere close to a living wage. And it is a step forward, and it's important we keep moving in that direction. And this is a year where they're taking a pause to study and to see if they want to keep going and moving towards $15 an hour. And we absolutely have to tell our city council that there are no alternatives, that we have to go to do that. We jumped right away at All Saints to $15 an hour at the minimum. Our lowest wage workers are making more than $15 an hour. And so we need that to be the standard for the city. So please go to the action table, sign a petition, write a letter. If you live in the city of Pasadena, write a letter to your member of city council to let them know that we absolutely, as a bare minimum, need to have a $15 an hour minimum wage here in the city of Pasadena. We are absolutely blessed today to have our speakers in the forum. The very Reverend Tracey Lind has been and done many things in the Episcopal Church. Most recently, she was the Dean of Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland, which I've just got to tell you is one of the best examples. I really can't think of a better one in the Episcopal Church of really taking that ministry of a cathedral, of being a church not just for a congregation, but a church that exists for the common good and really is the church in the public square. It's also what All Saints has done, I believe, so well. And frankly, I think we have a lot that we can learn from the work of Tracey Lind at Trinity Cathedral in Cleveland and the commons that they literally built there for the good of the community. And those of you who are at the Eucharist at 9 heard in her sermon, and you will hear if you go to 11:15, Tracey is newly retired. Not because it was part of her plan, but she was newly retired because she was diagnosed in 2016 with the early stages of frontotemporal degeneration, a form of dementia. And since then, she and her spouse, Emily, have embarked on a new journey, traveling the country and really traveling the world, talking about this as a spiritual journey, and really coming to communities like ours. And helping us imagine how we can receive the incredible gifts of all of God's children as we age, as different things happen to our body, and how we can care for each other in deeply and loving ways. And so I'm going to step aside, and I'm going to ask you to welcome first Tracey and then Emily to All Saints Church.
Thank you. As I said in the pulpit, and I'll say it again at 11:15, I am so delighted to be here. This is one of my most favorite churches in the whole wide world. You are really lucky to have the clergy team you have, most especially your Rector, Mike. And I am just grateful to be among you today, and I'm really grateful not to be in the snow. So, having said all of that, well, it's been about 2 years now since I was diagnosed with early stage dementia. And I tried to ignore those increasingly obvious signs and symptoms, thinking that it was stress or normal aging, or that because my mom died with Alzheimer's disease, that I was one of the worried well. But one day in the spring of 2016, shortly before my 62nd birthday, I was in a public restroom and I was washing my hands, and I looked in the mirror and I did not recognize my own face. Actually, I thought, who's that attractive woman? And then I looked around and realized there was nobody else in the room. That disconcerting episode galvanized me into making an appointment with a neurologist. And after 6 months of tests and exams, you all appreciate this, on Election Day 2016, I left my community organizing efforts of monitoring voting polls in inner city Cleveland, Ohio, and I went over to the Cleveland Clinic and I met up with Emily, and we heard those words. Tracey, the good news is that you don't have Alzheimer's. The bad news is that you have early stage dementia, probably frontotemporal degeneration. How many of you have ever heard of it? Yeah, it's called FTD. Doesn't have anything to do with flowers. And it's a rare form of dementia. It has no cure. It has limited treatments. It causes a gradual progressive decline in behavior and language, in executive function, that is the ability to make decisions and choices and plan and organize. And it usually leaves your long-term memory intact. I was with my dear relatives last night, wherever they are today. They're here somewhere. And I just want to let them know that I will be remembering all that stuff of our childhood all the way till the end. You better just hope I won't be able to talk about it, because one of the things that happens with FTD is a loss of filters. So Johnny, all those things you don't want known. Bring me good music and lots of chocolate. Anyway, it's far less common, far less understood. Generally affects people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's frequently misdiagnosed, and it leaves folks with an average life expectancy of 7 to 13 years after diagnosis. Dementia really is in my DNA. My mother, my maternal grandfather, and 2 of my maternal aunts all died with it. I watched my mother and many others, as have you, hide dementia, ashamed and embarrassed, as if it's a weakness or a punishment or perhaps even a sin. If only she had eaten less red meat and more dark green leafy vegetables. If only he had done the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning, especially on Saturdays. If only she had practiced daily meditation or yoga regularly for the past 10 years, and that list goes on and on and on. I liken dementia to cancer in the 1960s or AIDS in the 1980s, an incurable disease spoken of in hushed voices, as if we don't speak of it, it'll go away. And if we do speak too loud, we will be mortally embarrassed. So I refuse to live with dementia on those terms. I believe that denial is not useful, that honesty is important, that early detection and diagnosis can result in a longer and higher quality of life, and that transparency makes life easier for everybody involved. An early diagnosis allowed me to exit work gracefully on my own terms, to leave my position before I embarrassed myself or Trinity Cathedral. It allowed us to put our affairs in order and to make plans for the future, trying to imagine how we might experience a high quality of life as my dementia progresses. It's also given me the opportunity to do what I love to do and to spend time with those whom I love. Honesty has afforded me the incentive to be intentional about self-care, exploring ways to manage and perhaps slow the progress of my disease. And transparency has encouraged me to make sense of dementia and attempt to destigmatize it and to advocate on behalf of those who are not able to speak up. I was a pastor who could see you twice a year, address you by name, and remember to ask after your job search or inquire about your mother's health or your new puppy. But now, I might not recognize your face, and I probably will not recall your name. I was an executive who finds it difficult now to plan and organize and manage projects. I'm a writer and a public speaker who really seems to have a daily quota for conversation. I'm a photographer who can no longer manage my camera settings, a sailor who has forgotten my knots, that's dangerous, and a golfer who, no matter how hard I try, cannot recall where my ball just landed. I'm a cyclist who regularly loses my balance, and I'm a hiker who now walks with a tentative stride. I'm a reader who struggles to remember what I just read, and a foodie who has trouble ordering from a menu. I'm a seasoned traveler who gets anxious in airports, and a city dweller who can no longer handle urban living. And yes, I'm an extrovert, one of the biggest extroverts you will ever meet, who now becomes overwhelmed at parties. Early onset dementia is robbing me of many of the strengths that I have valued all of these years. While I might not show it, in the words of Christine Bryden, a remarkable woman living with FTD, most days I feel like a swan gliding above and paddling frantically beneath just to stay afloat. I have what's called primary progressive aphasia, that is, the loss of language. It is getting harder for me to speak and to write, especially in the evening in busy environments and when I feel frustrated or hurried or pressured. I've learned that language is a three-step process. We have to decide what we want to communicate, recall how to say or write it, and then we have to do it. When you're struggling to think and speak and write, this seemingly simple process is exhausting. And by the time I get to the third step, I often want to give up, or the conversation has simply moved on. I'm coming to realize that with the exception of involuntary actions like breathing, nearly everything we do in life is a three-step dance, a trinity of sorts. We have to decide what we want to do and how to do it, and then we have to do it. And this process comes so naturally that we deceive ourselves into believing we can do several things at once, like drive on the LA freeways, listen to the radio, admire the view, talk on the phone, and follow directions while eating a sandwich. But brain scientists will tell you there really is no such thing as multitasking. We just do a lot of stuff really fast. And I used to do a whole lot of stuff really, really, really fast. But people living with dementia will tell you that we can only do one thing at a time. And that becomes increasingly difficult as we desperately try to recall and to execute the steps of the dance. I often get tentative and anxious. I'm afraid that I will forget something important, that I will not recognize someone I know, or that I will become overwhelmed by my environment. And I've learned that anxiety is the undercurrent of this disease. People with cognitive impairment, especially in the early stages when we know it's happening, but others might not, We live on the edge of panic. But as I adjust to living with this condition, and together with Emily, we develop coping strategies, it is actually getting easier. In some ways, I feel better than I did 2 years ago. For instance, I've curtailed my number of activities and conversations during the day. If I know that there's going to be an important conversation in the evening, I don't talk the rest of the day. Thanks to speech therapy, I've learned descriptive workarounds for when I can't recall a word. My favorite word these days is thing. And then I describe it. You know, that thing that does X, Y, or Z, because I often can't remember what that thing actually is called. With the help of a physical therapist, I've learned how to break or prevent my falls. I've organized my closet into what I've now learned is very fashionable. It's a capsule wardrobe, so that I only see a limited number of items and they all go together. And yet, in the morning, it can take me 2 or 3 tries to figure out which white shirt to wear, even though they all look alike. When we go out to a restaurant, we try to look at the menu in advance, so that by the process of elimination, I can decide what I want to eat. And then when we get there, we ask for a quiet table, and Emily usually will remind me of what I decided to order. You know what comes next? The early bird. And I'm really not looking forward to that. Recently, we made the decision to sell our dream home, the one that we built, which overlooks the lake in a marvelous part of downtown Cleveland, for a quieter neighborhood so that we would live closer to family and friends and support systems. Since my diagnosis, I've been asking myself a lot of questions like, where is the grace in all of this? What are the unexpected gifts? What's the wisdom of a life interrupted by dementia? So I want to share with you a few of these life lessons. The first one is called No Longer the Captain. One of the realities of dementia is that as it progresses, your world becomes smaller and your realm of decision-making more limited. While I'm still able to manage daily living pretty well, I can't lead a large and complex organization. I'm still able to drive, but in due time, I'm going to give up that source of independence. I want to give it up. I don't want it taken away from me, and I don't want to have an accident before I give it up. And while I want to stay home as long as possible, there might come a time when I need a level of care, or I become a burden to care for, or I become too isolated and lonely that I'll have to move into some form of assisted community living. But while I'm no longer the captain, I'm discovering this freedom in not being in charge, a relief in not having to make so many decisions, and joy as I watch others take the helm. The second lesson, I call it the way of the child. Do you remember that 1990s movie Regarding Henry, starring Harrison Ford? It's about a high-powered New York lawyer who gets shot in the head, bringing his career to a screeching halt and leaving him with both brain damage and the spirit of a child. That's how I feel most days. I'm in this aging adult body with a brain that is damaged and shrinking, and a spirit that is becoming younger. For instance, I do ride my bike with new enthusiasm, sometimes pretending like I'm on a horse. I no longer look at art with the eye of a critic, but rather with the curiosity of a kid. I laugh at silly bathroom jokes. I cry at the drop of a dime. I sometimes want my teddy bear. And there are these moments when I reach for Emily's hand, or she takes mine, not like that of a lover or a spouse of nearly 20 years, but like that of a child with her parent. I don't like it when that happens, but on the other hand, Jesus once said, "Truly I tell you, unless you become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So I'm beginning to wonder if dementia has provided me with a shortcut. The great wisdom teachers, including Jesus, speak of dying to oneself and being reborn, or losing life and finding it anew. Good friend and teacher of this parish, Richard Rohr, calls this process falling upward into the second half of life, discovering what Edith Wharton once described as the fullness of life. I realize that I am falling upward into the fullness of life with dementia. I have no doubt that I'm losing the life I've always known, but I'm also certain that I'm gaining a new one. When I deny the reality of my disease and grieve the lost aspects of my old identity and resist the emerging aspects of the new me, I get tied up in knots. But when I accept what has died and let go of what has been lost, when I celebrate what is being reborn, and when I try to love and care in new ways for the person that is emerging, I start discovering surprising gifts and strengths, and a different kind of balance, and a different kind of wisdom, and a new way of living in the world. I'm also discovering that since I can't return to the past, and since I can't predict or control the future, I have to live in the here and the now. And maybe that's why Jesus said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow will bring worries of its own." Emily's going to talk to you a little bit about this from her perspective, which is kind of different from mine.
Tracey calls it dementia from inside out. I call it dementia from upside down, because frontotemporal degeneration has turned my well-ordered life completely upside down. Every marriage has its assigned roles. I managed our life, our finances, our home. Tracey managed a cathedral and her own schedule. Tracey's job was to be the extrovert, the advocate, the connection maker, both at work and in our relationship. My job was to facilitate all that. She invited the world to dinner, and I cooked for them. I hired the contractors, handymen, and house sitters, and she held their feet to the fire. She kept in touch with everyone she ever met, far and wide, and I made the travel arrangements to get us there. And I liked it that way. And then bam, life changed. I heard one of the titans of dementia doctors at the Cleveland Clinic say, kindly, gently, lovingly, but in essence, "Tracey, you have a disease you've never heard of. There's no treatment. There's no cure. You will have trouble speaking, and eventually you will become mute. Go home and get your affairs in order." Wow. So Tracey, the communicator, will become mute, and Emily, the shy one, will have to step up and be the advocate and social director. And my first thought, which still comes up on a regular basis, was, we are totally screwed. So in the first couple of months, we were engulfed in details and endings. We abruptly left the context and shape of our days with nothing really to replace it. And we were enmeshed in Social Security and pension disability, health insurance, and advanced directives. The details are formidable. The system is designed to be confusing. We had to shift gears really fast. Now, at this point in the narrative, Tracey's story and mine took different trajectories. Within 6 months of diagnosis, Tracey turned this piss pot into a pilgrimage. She quickly found meaning and purpose in it, but Tracey is in the habit of looking for and finding God in odd places. My journey was different. I'm in the habit of worrying and nattering on at God about things. And all the while Tracey was finding purpose and pilgrimage, I was praying, please just get me through this train wreck. It took me a solid year to work through my own grief and anger and fright. And so the grace of our situation and the deep love of God and the joy within our new life eluded me for quite some time. You see, my journey began from the perspective of loss of community, loss of dreams and goals for the future, loss of freedom to traverse the world in ways in which we always had, loss of a basic groundedness. I felt like not just the rug, but the entire floor had been pulled out from under me. Tracey described going through the Kubler-Ross stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, like a washing machine. Mine got stuck on the anger cycle. I was furious. Sometimes I still am. And the more Tracey got her act together, the angrier I became. And she would say, "Where is the grace of God in this?" And I would think, beats the crap out of me. Where is God? I grieved long and hard. I grieved for plans and bucket list items that are no longer feasible. I grieved in anticipatory grief of the long goodbye and the unfairness of it all. In my scenario for our future, there was a big front porch and a tree-lined street down which two old ladies would walk hand in hand, and the neighbors would say, "There go the girls today." My scenario did not include running mental interference as we walk today, scanning for potentially loud noises, lawnmowers, garbage trucks, or people coming up behind us, minding their own business that might cause Tracey to jump out of her skin because her sense of hearing is hypertuned and her peripheral awareness is diminished. My scenario did not include becoming a parent to my spouse before I turned 60. But over time, my perspective shifted. After the first couple of months, my prayer changed a little bit, and it went from a silent scream to, "Please help me walk this path with grace and courage and patience and competence and all those qualities I will need and have no idea whether they're in me." I made a point of asking care partners to share their wisdom and of discerning within myself what skills and qualities I already bring to the journey. Shortly after my prayer changed, I met a woman who had retired from a career of working in dementia care. And she's been helpful to me with specific coping strategies for the bad days, but more importantly, with gaining perspective on the whole journey. She's helped me see that our work, the care partners, is to look up and around whenever we can. Our work is to try to alleviate suffering on the bad days and to appreciate and preserve the moments of joy on the good ones. Dementia requires you to live in the space, in the moment, but many of those moments are beautiful and funny and strong. FTD is changing our relationship, not overnight, not all at once, but bit by bit. This person I dearly love is morphing into someone else. This woman who has spent her entire life walking the walk with teenagers in the South Bronx, with homeless people and sex workers in Patterson and Cleveland, bearding the homophobic lion, speaking truth in love to power, who has built vibrant, empowered faith communities, has pushed the boundaries in the church, in the boardroom, in the streets, now comes undone in the TSA line at the airport. It happens in little, tiny, heartbreaking moments. One day she can't organize the steps to a recipe she perfected 20 years ago. A week later, she doesn't remember that we had lunch an hour ago with her oldest and best friends. These moments just sneak up on us, and we realize that life together isn't what it once was. But her embedded memory, her strategic thinking, her wisdom is still alive and well. She's always been more self-aware than anyone I ever met, and she's aware of and able to describe her dementia, how it changes things, how it alters her perceptions. And I'm such a nerd, I find that interesting. We haven't figured it all out, and just when we think we have, something shifts. We have to stop and reassess our strategy. But our relationship is stronger than it has ever been, and each day is a gift. Some days are like they've always been, full of love and laughter and life's everyday annoyances. Tracey gets tired sooner. She walks more slowly, which means that I can enjoy her company and smell the flowers. Friends, some of them people I never expected would be there for us, have come out of nowhere with generous, practical help. And so my prayer has shifted again. It's still, please help me walk this path with grace and courage and competence, but now it also includes thank you. Thank you for those funny, beautiful moments, for reminding me to notice and appreciate them. Since that terrible day in November 2016, I have achieved a hard-won zen of it is what it is. While I would like to take this disease and beat it to a pulp, I have to take it as it comes. I have to pay attention to right here and right now. There are a number of things that used to derail me, and I have had to set them aside because they don't matter all that much, and that's very freeing. We travel the world, and with every trip comes laughter and new friends and new wisdom. And yes, my heart is broken, but God is very much walking by my side, and God's light is bright and loving. And so to paraphrase Ram Dass after he suffered a stroke, I don't wish this disease on anyone you love or on you, but I do wish you the grace of it. Grace?
So, dementia is a growing and expensive global health issue. Although dementia mainly affects older people, 1 in 4 over the age of 80 and 1 in 10 over the age of 65, it's not a normal part of aging. Dementia can happen to anybody, even those in their 20s. According to the World Health Organization, some 50 million people on the globe have dementia, and that's expected to increase to over 130 million by the year 2050. At present, it's the 7th leading cause of death in the world, and it is the leading reason for disability, dependence, and sometimes financial ruin among the elderly. Dementia doesn't discriminate. It doesn't seem to care about race, creed, income, education, or even sexual identity. But access to quality care does discriminate. And frankly, I worry that as boomers start to age, how many of you are boomers in this room? As we start to age and dementia begins to accelerate and grow at a rapid pace, that this disease could bankrupt Medicare and Medicaid. And I'm really fearful in this political climate, we will start warehousing those who don't have family support systems, can't take care of themselves, and can't afford assisted living. And as I've learned in this past week being here in California, you have some legislation on the books that makes it very frightening for people to admit they have dementia and not be forced to live in memory units. So you know what I've been thinking? I think that All Saints Pasadena might just have a new justice issue. You know? While we are spending a lot of time and energy trying to grow our churches with young people, and I certainly spent a lot of time and energy doing that, we also have a growing reality in our own midst, and that is we are an aging church. And I think we need to be taking a hard look at ageism, and at the spirituality of aging, and at the reality of all of those things that begin to affect those of us as we grow older. And most especially, I think we need to look at the issue of dementia. Because one of the challenges for people living with FTD, with Alzheimer's, with Lewy body disease, with vascular dementia, with all of those forms of dementia, is that people lose the ability to tell their own stories and advocate on their own behalf. And that is why, for as long as we are able, Emily and I are determined to tell our story of dementia from the inside out and the upside down. So thank you for listening. We have time for about 10 minutes of questions and conversation. So how do you want to handle that? How do you handle that?
You're right there.
Okay. So, questions, thoughts, conversations. Yeah, old friend, Gloria. Oh, here comes the microphone.
I hope you'll all stay with me for a very short story about Emily and Tracey. I'm Gloria, my husband Bob. We are Clevelanders. We grew up in Cleveland, and we came to a part of our life where I had been Catholic, Bob had been Lutheran, and we were sort of spiritually adrift, not sure how we wanted to move forward. And people told us about the Episcopal Church, so visiting here to see our kids, we came to All Saints, and it blew our minds. Then we had to go back to Cleveland and say, now what do we do?
You got to go back to Cleveland.
Yes, and people said, try Trinity Cathedral, so we did. We came there in the spring. It was just before Easter, and we went to a Good Friday service where we happened to sit right in front of Tracey and Emily. And they both had this wonderful conversation welcoming us and so glad we were there. And they said, what are you doing on Easter? And we both said, well, we'll have dinner together. Our children have all moved out of Cleveland. And she said, well, that's it. You're coming to our house. And Bob and I were like, wait a minute, what? Like, Catholic priests don't invite you to their house. I mean, so we both said, okay, are you sure? Well, she invited us to her house with about 8 of her family and friends, and we had one of the most delightful meals ever. And I will never forget how she and Emily cemented for us what the Episcopal Church was all about. That's why we're here. And I'm about to cry, so I'm going to stop because you don't know how much you meant to our lives.
Thanks.
And what a difference you made to both of us.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or conversations or comments? There's one right over there.
Thank you so very much. I'm newer to this congregation. I'm Anabaptist by background, but I work in Dr. Bredesen's program to roll back dementia and move forward all the possibilities that you embody. So I simply want to thank you for being a public presence. I will carry your card and this broadcast to all that I get a chance to affect. I went through Functional Medicine Coaching Academy. I'm working with Dr. Bredesen's company right now as liaison, so I really see possibilities, especially with Medicare for All, introducing their new bill in California, following New York's, creating an independent health care system based on savings from the Affordable Care Act. So we can do this. Your point is extremely well heard here, and with those of us also affected in this congregation, I know we can build momentum around what you're asking. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say a word about Dr. Bredesen. Have any of you heard of the book, The End of Alzheimer's? There are doctors, especially out here on the West Coast. One of my oldest and dearest friend in the world is one of those doctors, and they are arguing that dementia is a multifaceted disease with many components and many causes. And while it is still in the early stages of testing and trial, the idea of if we can do some relatively radical lifestyle changes and do some detoxing of the environmental pollutants that many of us carry in our bodies, and that we can manage this. For the first year after my diagnosis, I really thought of myself as having a terminal disease and hoping and praying that I would be an outsider on the long end of it. And thanks to Dr. Bredesen and his colleagues, Dr. Damon Miller, another another one of these doctors out here. I'm living with it as a chronic illness. And it's not proven, and they will readily admit that. It's very hard to do these clinical trials. But I would say, and it's especially not been tested with FTD, it's been tested with Alzheimer's more. But I would say to all of you, what's good for the heart is good for the head. And that all the stuff your doctor is telling you is stuff to pay attention to. And I wish maybe I had been paying attention a little earlier. I don't know. I don't know if it would have changed the situation. I don't know if all of the changes in my own life and diet and exercise and all that stuff that I'm trying to do now will I don't know what kind of impact it will have. I don't want to feel guilty. You should never feel guilty about the life you have lived. It's not useful. But I have nothing to lose by trying some of this to the best of my ability. So it's Dr. Brendanson, Dr. Damon Miller. The book is The End of Alzheimer's. The clinic is called, it's at UCSF, UCLA?
Currently called ahnp.org, and they have a telemedicine type program available for folks.
So check it out. Check it out. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose. Any other comments or questions? Yes. Okay, one more, wherever it is. Yes, ma'am.
I don't quite know what to say, but I've been on the other end. I lost my husband to Alzheimer's 13 months ago.
I'm sorry.
I am amazed that you're so articulate and so positive. I'm in recovery. I feel like I lost 6 years, and I was with my husband every day, and I'm still grieving. I can honestly say that I've finally, in the last week or two, feel happier than I've felt in a long time. But the journey is so hard when you love somebody so much that I cry every day. I can't help it, but I'm working at it and trying to be positive. But I think one of the things that I've concluded after being in a dementia unit, I tried to take care of him until he kept running away, and I couldn't protect him anymore. But the people that I got to know that are in the caring positions all told me that they would stop eating. They would not go through Alzheimer's. And that's really been hammered into my brain. I would much rather, because the cost of it's so great, that I'd much rather, if I'm diagnosed with Alzheimer's, to stop eating and allow my children and grandchildren to live a better life. And that may sound horrible to people, but that's where I am. And I know but I have to say it because it's what I've concluded.
It's not horrible. I want to respond in two ways. Aside from the fact that I'm sorry for your loss and I'm sorry for the long and painful journey you walked. The two responses are, one is, I'm in the early stages of this. I was diagnosed very early, and I'm grateful for that because it has allowed me to make some changes and to live a rich and a full life for as long as I can. Secondly, my mother, at the end of her journey with Alzheimer's, did decide to stop eating and drinking, and that was her choice. And she died a peaceful and gracious death. And it is one of the very few options that people with dementia have. And we're out of time, so here's the one thing I want to say to you. It's really important now to do your advanced directives and to be very, very, very specific about how you want to live and how you want to die. I'm happy to come back sometime and do some work with all of you around that, but it gets complicated with dementia. But the more specific you are, the more you put it in writing, and the clearer you are with your doctor, your lawyer, if you're in a retirement community, the people who run that community, and your children, all of them collectively in one room, and you do it over and over and over again, you will have some control about the end of your life. And dying by not eating and not drinking is an okay thing, and it's not that painful. So thank you for your
thank you
comment.
for-
But please,
thank you
I'm
saying
early
that.
in this journey.
Two things. First of all, thank you. Can we express our thanks to Tracey and Emily? And